You may have noticed the gas price dropped 50 cents over the last week. Here's why that's not a good thing. Obviously, all of us are struggling to afford gas prices, and we want the prices to come down. But I promise you want the prices to come down for the right reasons. First off, I don't think it's a coincidence that Congress passes a law, signs through their portion anyways, stating that they are going to allow E15 to be added to your fuel tank year-round. It's pretty interesting how the gas price drops 50 cents after this announcement breaks news, right? Interesting, okay? Now, additionally, this is going to backfire on our fuel reserves in America. And here's why. When you artificially lower the price of an item, meaning you just force the price down, you haven't had an increase in supply, you haven't had a decrease in the cost of inputs, you just force the price down, you are going to experience artificially inflated demand, okay? So through studying economics for my master's degree, which I have studied a ton of, the laws of supply and demand are pretty clear here. When the price goes down, more people buy. Okay, so last week you might not have been able to afford to fill up your gas tank, but this week 50 cents cheaper, you're gonna decide to force yourself to fill up, even if you can't really afford it. You are not the only one who's going to do this. People who normally would put a quarter or a half a tank are going to fill up because it's cheaper, and we are going to deplete our fuel reserves more rapidly. Okay, for those of you who don't know what's going on in the Middle East with America, America is at war with Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz has been closed for a few months now. Although America has very large oil reserves, our reserves of refined fuel are much less, okay? We are experiencing the lowest level of fuel reserves that we have had in 2 decades. We are well on the way to having fuel reserve numbers. And let me be clear, when I say fuel reserve numbers, I know somebody's gonna be in the comments being like, America has more oil than anyone in the world. I want you to go buy motor oil and pour it in your gas tank and see what happens, okay? We don't need oil, we need gas. And we are running out. There is major economists, okay, people who are advisors to the President of the United States, who estimate by the end of June or early July, we will be in dangerously low levels for our fuel reserves in this country, okay? The reason for this is we cannot get crude oil or partially or fully refined fuel through the Strait of Hormuz whatsoever. That is normally a 2-directional street. We get fuel through, oil comes back, and vice versa. Additionally, the inputs needed to drill and refine oil are being limited. Heavy machinery is struggling to get through the Strait of Hormuz. The chemicals used for refining fuel are struggling to get through the strait. So with that being said, because the government is trying to force the price lower, we are going to watch our fuel reserves deplete more rapidly. Period. End of story. It is basic economics. And once we realize how low our demand, our supply of fuel in America actually is, once we realize we are entering into shortage territory, the price is going to be higher than anything we have ever experienced before, okay? So please share this video with your people so they know what's going on in the world. Prepare yourself, protect yourself, and don't tell nobody about it.
A New Mexico town has declared a water emergency because a nearby ICE detention facility is using all of its water supply. The crisis erupted after its wells dropped to critically low levels driven by years of severe drought combined with high consumption from its largest commercial water consumer, a federal immigration detention center. The facility, which is privately operated by Core Civic and under contract with ICE, along with other commercial users, reportedly consumed roughly 90% of the town's entire water supply in 2026. So now the town has been forced to start hauling and trucking in water from out-of-town sources to fill the municipal backup systems. This is a small community of only 1,400 residents. In contrast, this detention facility can hold up to 800 detainees, placing a ridiculous burden on local infrastructure under the town's existing commercial water contracts. The DHS Office of Inspector General previously issued an alert demanding that ICE remove all detainees from this facility due to unsanitary living conditions. But despite the federal watchdog's explicit warnings the facility endangered human health, ICE refused to close it and instead continued to transfer more people into the complex, further accelerating the local water depletion.
We need to talk about reform trying to copy Trump because we've already seen where this goes. I'm an American who's been living in the UK for the last 15 years, and we'll just say I've been following both of our politics. This is a trick that was used in the US and has been used by authoritarian movements across time. So if you personally think that you want to vote for reform because it's a populist movement, though I can think of some other reasons you might feel that way, I really need you to wake up. So here's what they've been doing. Tell people who are struggling that the country has been stolen from them. You give them a language to speak about this in. You tell them they've been humiliated and and ignored, and that somebody else has taken what's rightfully theirs. And to an extent, that is true. Thatcher and Reagan-era policies and the resulting neoliberal hellscape that we live in has done most of those things to the general population. They know that you feel this. They know we feel this. But they don't want us to know why. So they direct this anger, this understanding away from the people who actually have the power. We could never be angry with the billionaires, the corporations, the landlords, the political donors, the people sitting on obscene amounts of wealth while other people can't afford childcare, food, groceries, electricity, housing, and so on. No, 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 no. We have to point it at migrants, at disabled people, at people who claim benefits, at neurodivergent people, at trans people, at woke teachers. Guys, this is not just culture war nonsense. It's doing very, very real political work that billionaires are paying a lot of money for. It keeps working class people fighting each other while the people with actual money and power get richer and safer and even more untouchable. And in the US, this is not hypothetical at all. Trump sold himself as the voice of the forgotten working class. But what do you think we got? More corruption, more billionaire access, more attacks on public services. Guys, we basically don't have a Department of Education right now. And now Reform are trying to sell Britain the same thing. The Trump cosplay and the little authoritarian fantasies of Nigel Farage. This kind of politics, Reform's kind of politics, does not redistribute power. It just redirects blame, and there is a very, very big difference between those two things. Populist politics, so working class politics, means better wages, secure housing, healthcare, childcare, public services that actually work. Not telling somebody that their life is difficult because a migrant or a disabled person is getting something that does not belong to them, because that is a con. If you truly think that populism is why you want to vote for Reform, please don't fall for the oldest scam in politics.
I can tell you the results of Trump's physical right now. He's at Walter Reed undergoing his 3rd annual routine physical in 13 months, but I can pretty much guarantee with a high level of certainty, this is exactly what the public is going to hear. We're going to hear the repeated term chronic venous insufficiency, and that's going to be used to explain the constant swelling that we see. As for the bruising, they're going to put that on aspirin. They are going to say that there is nothing physically wrong with Donald Trump. No cardiovascular issues, no other illnesses, that he's perfectly healthy for a man of his age. And I wouldn't be surprised if they threw in healthier than any other man his age, because, you know, that's how Trump usually works. Now, we're likely also going to get a brag from Donald Trump himself on passing yet another cognitive assessment. Those cognitive assessments that they give to track people's, cognitive decline or screen them for possible cognitive impairment. Now, Trump has taken a number of these and bragged about it in the past, and we're likely going to hear that he not only took one, that he volunteered to take this cognitive assessment again, and he's going to brag that he did better than anyone who's ever taken it, and likely insult somebody like, Joe Biden or Barack Obama, like he did the last time, saying he didn't think Barack Obama could tell the difference between certain animals. So yeah, that's what we're going to get, and we know it's going to be complete bullshit.
All right, I'm back. And yes, I do have more Trump stories. Don't worry. I promise I will give them to you guys. I promise they are good. There are a lot of new people here, and I have some rules in my house, okay? We'll start with housekeeping, and then I'll give you a short story at the end. Here are the rules if you want to be here and you don't want me to block you. Number 1, and I cannot stress this enough, is take your shoes off. Okay, don't bring the dirt from your day inside my house, in my comment section, on my page. You are mad about some shit that happened in your life. This is not your place to take it out on people, and this is not your emotional gym, okay? Witty banter is welcome. Don't get all aggro in my comments. I will block you. Well, first I will let you embarrass yourself, and then I will block you, okay? Number 2, and this is also very important, if you are just here for this series and you go and comment on any of my other content, do not be rude. Do not comment on videos about me and my band and tell me to shut the fuck up and tell Trump stories, okay? I will block you so fast. Because making comments like that, you know who you sound like? I'll give you one guess. Yeah, I don't put up with that shit. I will block you. Also, my band is fucking awesome. Go check it out. If it's not for you, don't say anything rude. But if you like it, awesome. Got a new single coming out soon, and it's really fucking good. So go check out Juliet the Band. Rule number 3, finally, is very simple. It's kind of like the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated in here, right? Love thy neighbor as thyself. And, you know, I would say that, but I don't think a lot of you guys love yourselves. So maybe treat everybody in here the way that you would treat maybe your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister. Which, again, witty banter, welcome. Love a good comment section with a lot of witty banter. So y'all bring it on. Okay, now I have a short story for you guys. I was going to do one about Barron, but I've got a shorter one about Trump outfit. This is kind of unsurprising, but it's absolutely hilarious to me to imagine. Every single evening, if Trump didn't say otherwise, it was basically a default thing to order McDonald's for dinner. This guy's default order is 2 Big Macs, 2 Filet-O-Fish.
Wow.
I guess if it's in season, I don't know what the substitute is, and always a chocolate shake. Allegedly, he would often eat a lot of McDonald's with his other staff in the Oval Office instead of in the area where they're supposed to eat. He would keep the door closed, doing work for hours while they ate and worked. As you can imagine, it probably smelled awful in there. And oftentimes the next morning when they would have people come into the Oval Office for meetings or for meet and greets or whatever, it would smell terrible. They would have to come have people spray stuff all over the Oval Office so it didn't smell like Filet-O-Fish and Big Macs when important people came into the Oval Office. I thought all that gold was bad. Can you imagine? Ugh. Follow my rules or I will block you.
Trump was right about Ukraine, and now the media is quietly admitting it. Look, you don't have to like Trump. You don't have to support Putin, but you may want to pay attention for a moment because something massive just shifted. The Hill, one of the biggest political outlets in DC, just dropped an article called, "Sadly, Trump is right on Ukraine." That headline alone is enough to make half the media scramble for damage control. But what's inside that article is even more powerful. They admit that the war in Ukraine wasn't unprovoked, that it was Ukrainian right-wing militants who ignited the conflict back in 2014, long before Russia took Crimea. That Zelensky, far from being a hero of peace, rejected multiple peace agreements, pushed for NATO military involvement, and amped up aggression in the Donbass region. He banned opposition parties, shut down the media outlets, and then begged for more weapons to defend democracy. In the West, they didn't just let it happen. They funded it. They armed it. And they sold you a one-sided story on every major network day and night for years. They told you this war started in 2022, that Russia attacked unprovoked, that Zelensky was the last man standing between freedom and tyranny. That was a script. And if you questioned it, you were labeled a traitor, a Putin puppet, or even worse. But now, even the Hill is admitting it's not that simple. And here's what they're not saying out loud. Trump said all this years ago. He said NATO expansion was reckless. He said West was playing games in Ukraine. He said we were headed for a war we didn't need. And now the same media that mocked him is quietly backpedaling. So why now? Because the narrative is cracking, because independent journalists, alternative media, and everyday people like us kept pushing for the truth. Because mainstream media knows people are waking up. The same people who lied to us in Iraq and Afghanistan have been lying about Ukraine, and now they're getting caught. So no, I'm not a pro-Russia, I'm not a pro-Zelensky person, I'm pro-truth, pro-reality, and pro-peace. And here's the thing, you don't have to pick a side to see what's going on. You just need to pause, zoom out, and do a little bit of digging, because once you step outside the media filter, the picture changes. You start to see how much we've been manipulated, not just into war, but into turning on each other. The elites thrive on distraction, on outrage, on fear. But now,
thank you.
So before you start replying with hateful words, take a moment. You have the chance to think for yourself. Question why you're so angry and look at what is being presented in front of you. I challenge you to do it. Not for Trump, not for Putin, not for a flag. Do it for the truth. Do it for peace. So share this, because war thrives on lies. And peace starts with waking up.
It's been 16 days since a nuclear reactor was installed inside the Colorado River Basin, accelerating the evaporation of the water supply of 50 million people across 7 states. And I would like to discuss the politics of the situation. We were told that the United States is a free country. However, we do not even have a free market economy. Back in the 1960s, a company called International Business Machines, or IBM, created a
Iran
byte
was.
standard. So this is an 8-bit standard for our computers, which went from 8 to 16 to 32 to 64 bits. And this is the computational architecture that is in all computers today. Now, if we had a free market economy, companies would have been actually able to compete, and we would have been able to find the correct physics for the computation which we use. However, IBM, in collaboration with the US government, and I suspect the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and these other tech companies, standardized the byte into the US government underneath the US Department of Commerce in a group called NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards Technology. And this standardization, keep in mind, this is a private company that essentially had this entire government and then thereby the entire world agree that they would build on their technology without ever confirming that their technology was correct and in alignment with physics and wasn't just market selected, like arbitrarily. And so all of these tech companies and all of the bank's investments have been built on this byte architecture, which has many cybersecurity issues in it, including being thermodynamically inflamed and causing astronomical scaling, producing the demand for data centers and nuclear power systems in the first place. Now, this creates a monopoly, a global monopoly, which IBM holds now. And it's embedded in the US government. So it makes it difficult for companies like mine, Infoton, to enter the scene. Because in addition to making this entire space difficult, they built up structures around themselves through the education system to protect themselves.
The reason why poor white people continue to support Donald Trump, even though his policy directly makes their lives even worse, is because they don't actually vote for politicians on the basis of policy. They actually vote for ideology. Donald Trump embodies whiteness and he upholds white supremacy. And for a lot of poor white people who have accomplished nothing in life, who have very little access to opportunity, upholding something that gives them worth, even though it's based on the one thing that they had no control over, even though it's based on a lie, is more important than fighting for a system where everyone benefits. And this is why there's always this sort of state of confusion when people say, how can you vote against universal health care? Why would you not want more money going to schools? Why are you okay with a politician blatantly taking your tax dollars and pocketing it, rather than using it for the greater good? When poor Europeans came to America, they received a benefit in America that they were not afforded in Europe. And that was whiteness. And all they had to do was abandon everything they learned in Europe, abandon their heritage, their language, their customs, their traditions, anglicize their names, and they were afforded every single privilege that they did not have in Europe. They could be entrepreneurs, have access to loans, send their children to good schools. They were finally on the top of the hierarchy. And I don't think people realize how much success and building wealth and having money is tied up into whiteness. It is a political term that was born out of capitalism. And so for these white people who have not actually succeeded under this system, whiteness means everything to them. This is why you have poor people who are so against systems like socialism, even though it would give them more power. It would give them more agency. That would actually require that they give up the one thing that they value the most, the one thing that gives them value. And if that means worshiping someone like Donald Trump, while he destroys Social Security, makes their lives more unaffordable, makes it more difficult for them to access healthcare, that is what they're willing to sacrifice.
I think the most unintelligent thing that you can say on the conversation of homelessness is that they should just get a job. Did you know 40 to 60% of people experiencing homelessness in America already have one? Crazy concept. Employment doesn't equal housing. Sometimes income is just not enough income. The National Low Income Housing Coalition says there's no state, no metro area, no county in America where a full-time minimum wage worker can afford a 2-bedroom. Statistically, at like a fair market rent. And in 2025, a full-time worker needed almost $29 an hour to afford a one-bedroom rental home nationally. So when someone who's working 40 hours a week still can't afford basic apartments, maybe homelessness isn't about getting a job. And I mean, if we think about this toxic landlord-tenant culture, think about what it costs to move into an apartment, right? First month's rent, sometimes last month's rent, security deposit, application fees, there's credit checks, income requirements, deposits for your utilities. If you're already living paycheck to paycheck, where are you supposed to come up with thousands of dollars overnight? That's the trick to the system. They never want you to stop renting. And then people are like, oh, well don't rent, just go buy a house instead. That's becoming harder too. Housing is increasingly becoming an investment instead of just a place to live. People are buying houses to rent them. The Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University said investors purchased nearly 31% of all single-family homes sold in the first quarter of 2025. That's almost 1 in 3 houses being purchased by investors instead of families looking for somewhere to live. That is insane. Wow. So whether it's large corporations buying neighborhoods or individual private landlords owning multiple properties, more homes are being purchased as rental investments instead of owner-occupied homes. Every house that is turned into a rental is one less opportunity for someone to become a homeowner. And that's the trick. Years of paying rent makes it harder to save for a down payment. We live in a society where landlords can own 10 houses, but the people working full-time inside those same communities can't afford one. And that's the main critique of capitalism. Renting is supposed to be temporary. Supposed to be. But when rent is eating your paycheck, you never save enough to escape it. Owning a home has actually been one of the main ways families build wealth in America. But when you own a home, the money that you are spending every month can turn into something you actually own. But when you're renting forever, your money is only building your landlord's wealth instead of yours. And honestly, we can just look back in history and it proves my point. We know that withholding home ownership affects people's poverty levels. Black families, for decades, they were legally and financially shut out of buying homes in certain neighborhoods. Redlining was when banks and governments marked black neighborhoods as risky, which made it impossible for black families to get home loans. So black families weren't just denied houses, they were essentially just denied the chance to build any wealth or pass property down to their kids, escape poverty. That's the reason, one of the reasons, that racial wealth gap still exists today. Today's housing crisis is not the same thing as redlining, but the lesson's absolutely the same. When people are locked out of home ownership, they're locked out of one of the biggest ways that families build stability and wealth and get out of poverty in this country. On top of that, if you didn't know, cities have zoning laws that make it illegal or difficult to build the kind of housing that's actually affordable. So there's restrictions on like building duplexes, triplexes, courtyard apartments, like higher density housing. So on top of all of this, when you're limiting the amount of housing that can be built while the demand keeps growing and homelessness is increasing, the prices are going up. And I think also our distortion, like our distorted image of homelessness is part of the problem. When people hear the word homelessness, they picture someone sitting on a sidewalk asking for change. Nobody's picturing the woman who's sleeping in her car before heading to work, or the guy who has to shower at Planet Fitness before his shift. Right? Nobody's thinking about the families that are rotating between all of their relatives' different couches so that they can clock in every single morning and have someone to watch the kids. So the next time someone says, well, why don't homeless people get a job? 40 to 60% of them already do.
Thanks for watching.
The problem's not unemployment. Sometimes it's that having a job is no longer enough to guarantee a place to live. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as it's supposed to, and it's not working for us.
Very, very thank you.